Business as Unusual is a thought-provoking podcast that explores the innovative strategies, disruptive ideas, and unconventional practices driving successful leaders and companies in the ever-evolving world of modern business. Subscribe, comment, and share for weekly inspiration with our host, Alicia.
In this episode of Business as Unusual, I'm joined by Todd Bracher, the founder of BetterLab, to delve into the world of purpose-driven design and innovation. Discover how design impacts our daily lives in ways we might not even notice, and why aligning business goals with sustainable practices is crucial for future success. Todd shares insights from his extensive career and offers advice for entrepreneurs and designers alike. Whether in business, design, or just curious about how things work, you're in for an engaging conversation that will leave you thinking about the purpose behind everything we create. Stay tuned. Welcome to Business as Unusual. I'm here today with Todd Bracher, the founder of BetterLab, and we're going to talk a little bit about purpose-driven innovation and probably a couple of other things. Welcome to the show, Todd.
Hey, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Is there anything else you want to mention about BetterLab or what you're up to, or should I just dive right into questions?
No, let's just dive right in.
So I was reading through your bio on your website, and I'm a comparative literature major way back in the day. So I love geeking out about English. And it looks like you used purpose in two ways, both functional and meaningful. Do you think that tracks?
That's interesting. Yeah, absolutely. I have a sort of way of seeing design in some ways in the world or life, which I call contextual-based design. And what I mean by that is, if you take an example of a tree, I don't think we look at a tree in the park and we're walking there and I don't think you'll say that tree's got too many leaves, or the green is just not right, or it's too tall, or I think these sort of comments would be kind of funny because we accept the tree to be a result of an ecosystem, So to me, its purpose is controlled by the environment and whatever the conditions are. So the work I do is very much in that logic. So I try to design the ecosystem essentially and let the object, if you want to call it that, kind of be inevitable. So that's how these two sort of align for me.
Is there something that you wish more people knew about design?
That's a great question. I think for me, design's everywhere, right? Your menu in the restaurant, the food that you're eating, the chair you sit on, of course, it's all design. The text, the font that you're looking at when you're typing your friends in. So it's everywhere. And I think we tend to not, it's becoming a little cliche to hear this, but I think it's true. We tend to not notice design when it's right. Really good design, I think we can notice. Really bad design, I think we can notice. But when it's right, I think it just sort of is transparent. So people don't really give it as credit as design. It's just there. But that to me is a good sign when things are not that noticeable.
Yeah. My daughter sometimes calls me when she's leaving her Pilates class. And last time she said, "This parking lot reminds me why we have civil engineers and that no one was consulted on this design." It's just laughing so hard.
Whenever I walk up to a door handle and it's round and I'm carrying things, I say, yeah, who would design these things? I run into a lot of things like this in my life. I'm sure it sounds like your daughter, and where you question how these things come about.
I love that about her. So how would you define success for yourself?
So it's really evolved over the years. And I think because as a young designer, you don't have a whole lot of strength. You come kind of at the very tail end of the food chain. Just make it look good. That's your role. Very cosmetic. And over the years, I've scratched up the ladder a bit to be able to influence decisions that are really happening used to be behind closed doors, the business meetings. And so I think for me, really, the success is now trying to help companies really operate with a sustainable understanding, really at scale that helps humanity and less just about their bottom line. And you'd be surprised how often you hear, well, we don't want to do things that are sustainable because it costs more money. And now I'm in positions where I can say, well, then we won't help you, or good luck because you will be dead and your business will die. And there's a lot of reasons I think it's a bad decision for companies to do that, not just because of the environment. So I think for me, I measure success just in now being able to help companies make the right decisions.
Do you have a sense of how your success would impact the industries that you're engaged in?
My individual success, meaning
Yeah,
like
like that
like
being able this thing that you're talking about, like
yeah,
that ability to
100%. We came with a short story, a task chair, an office chair, the type of chair you sit in front of a computer. Those chairs are historically known as terrible offenders for the environment. They're made of 70 something components. That means 40 factories are shipping parts and assembling things. And it becomes really a mess. And so it's just environmentally a catastrophe. And they sell tens of thousands of these chairs a year. And then companies either downsize, move, go out of business, you name it. And these chairs end up in landfills. What we did is design the world's most sustainable chair, in fact, and it happens to be a work chair because we know they're horrible offending chairs. And by doing that, in the very beginning, folks thought, well, why would you do that for an office chair? But when you start to understand the story, then you realize, oh, it's really at scale now. That's like a meaningful change. And we're seeing now a lot of other companies are starting to chase that target because they realize we set a bar, and I think folks really want to match it because it's the culture of the buyers of these products expect it now. So I'm seeing that shift. So I'm happy to see that happen.
that I've seen that in different industries. I came up through nonprofits, and just oftentimes the humane decision is also the most cost effective and functional. And people have to get out of a rut of thinking, right? To get to that understanding. So that's awesome.
You're right.
Is there something that you were part of designing that you were most surprised by the impact or the result? Like you didn't think it was going to be anything, or maybe you did. I'm always going to the positive, but you're welcome to provide any story you find interesting.
I think I'm pretty optimistic, but I always feel like it's never going to resonate. I don't know why, even though I feel like I'm pretty optimistic. Yeah. So I guess it's like, it's funny because this conversation I started with the tree, this idea of design and context, the whole point is to take my personality out of the equation, right? The tree, the leaf is what it has to be. It's not some opinion. And so I always feel like if it's my opinions in there, no one cares. No one cares what Todd thinks. Like they need something to work. And so therefore I always feel like the more I can remove myself from it, the better likelihood things are going to succeed in the market. So specific examples, things succeed for strange reasons. But we did a lighting product that was very, very simple. And believe it or not, so when the LED started to really take off like 10 years ago, 8 years ago, it's very glary. Like it's incredibly difficult to look at. Even today, folks don't really manage the LED light very well because it's a point light. It's like really bright dot. So we created with this company 3M a way to use physics that sort of hides the LED, but it still delivers the light. So it looks like an empty glass of water, like it's a clear, solid tube, but light just comes out at the bottom. So it's really kind of magical. And that's why people love it. And to me, it was because there's no glare. The light's really even. It works perfectly in any environment. But folks loved it because it looked magical. It was just mysterious technology, but it's just physics. So you never know what people are going to really gravitate to.
Magic is anything we don't understand, right?
I suppose. Yeah, I suppose.
As the magician is following pretty practical principles. We don't understand how it works. So
I think
that's to us.
I think that's why I love magic. And like, it's so much fun because you're just like, there's no way this is actually magic. So, but it's incredible how they can convince you.
Yeah, it's an interesting, I love that too. That sort of, it's not, and yet it feels like it is. It's a delightful place of wonder and curiosity, right? Like there isn't as much of that as we get older in life.
100%.
Hopefully get older. So purpose-driven design, can you break that down a bit? Oh, what does it mean to you or in general? I don't know if there's like a specific definition, and why care about it?
Yeah, I don't know. There probably is a specific definition, but I would go to, I'm 25 years in the business now, and I go to these shows in Milan, and I've been part of them. And hey, a new sofa you made, congratulations! And everyone's throwing a party for you. And I look around and I say, there's hundreds of new sofas here, and there's hundreds of designers getting celebrated for making a new sofa. And don't get me wrong, in the beginning, I thought that was like the goal. But when you zoom out, you start realizing like this is some of the world's top talent, like focused on making like soft things to sit on. They're not really focused on actually solving real world problems. So for me, purpose-driven design is really to take that type of mentality of like problem solving, but really putting it to where it's going to help folks. and really help folks at scale. And that's really an important distinction. And so for me, that's the purpose of BetterLab, is really to focus on those types of things and not these kind of nice, cool objects. Those things, they'll exist and they should exist. And there's great designers that do that stuff. But the purpose-driven aspect, I really want to see more folks lean into.
I'm fully supportive of that. Do you have any tips you can talk about with the practical application around that? I don't know if that totally fits for what you're up to.
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, this is another thing to mention. It gets to one of your earlier questions around what should few people maybe know about design. I think everyone also is a designer, which is cool. There's no license to be a designer, right? Yeah, okay, you go to design school, I guess, and you call yourself a designer, but that doesn't really mean anything ultimately. What I think sort of the tips are that there's a lot of folks that are tinkerers and kind of makers and sort of doing things on their own and in the garage, but they have a day job of who knows what, of anything else, school teacher or whatever. And I don't think a lot of folks see what they are exploring as, okay, I'm not a designer, so I can't really, or I'm not an engineer. And I think that's not a fair way to look at it. I think they know as much as any of us, and they're exploring something that might actually help folks at a larger scale to consider taking steps to moving those things forward. And it's not a mystery to it. So I think my sort of advice in some ways is, for folks to really be open-minded about how they see themselves. And if they're really got some ideas that they want to see in the world, there's a reason why they can't bring it out.
Seconded. Here's another one. What advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
I think take more, and this kind of is a global response, but take more risk. I was having a conversation actually just yesterday around, hey, would you ever bungee jump? And I asked this woman and she said, yeah, I have. And she says, I went to New Zealand, the highest spot in the world, and I bungee jumped. And I'm looking at her like, I'm getting anxiety just hearing it. I am like very careful with my like physical self. And she said it really changed her life because it gave her like understanding of her limits. She says, you really think you're going to die and then you don't. And it's incredible. And so all this kind of experience. So I think it sounds sort of cliche and it's not design focused, but I guess it does relate to it, the idea of taking more risks. Because even with design or with any kind of creator activity, I think there's a lot of fear. And I think I have less fear in creating than I do physically. That's a separate conversation. But I think don't fear so much. Just get things out there and see. And I think that's when I was 18, I was less fearful. Maybe I've grown more fearful, but I think still fearful. And I think I could have really learned more faster if I was out there being a bit more fearless.
Yeah. Do you think there was in terms of the design piece, the question that came up for me is, was there sort of a perfection thing? Like I have to get this right, or that the fear of taking that risk because there's a quote unquote right way, or was it?
Yeah, it's interesting. If you're equated to being a singer or something like this, you make your first album and it went pretty well. And there's like 10 songs on the album and they all sound adjacent. And then album 2 is coming out. You're like, okay, I guess it's got to be the version of album 1. You can't be all of a sudden a country singer if you were a jazz musician. So you end up finding yourself in a lane, and years and decades go by and you're like in that lane and people expect you to still be in that lane. And at some point you realize like, hey, there's other things I wanted to have tried and you never did. So I think, and I don't really know why. And I guess there's some argument to say for a singer, it's wise to stay in a lane. I don't know, but I think be more interested. I don't think designers, it's that delicate. I think you can afford to be a variety of things, and I don't think it's going to destroy your career. But I really did that. I mostly stayed in the lane, and I like the lane, but I would have explored other aspects, I think.
I mean, you could get into a whole philosophical thing in terms of art, like who is it for? Because I think an audience get an expectation.
Yeah.
And do we get to have that? I mean, theoretically, I don't think so, but with certain artists, I'm like, oh yeah, I get to.
Yeah, and you want to see more of
fair.
it. Yeah, you want to see the evolution of it and a relationship to the past in a way, but not just complete 90-degree turn. And I know when Michael Jordan, when he went from basketball to baseball, and I remember it was like anyone who's like roughly my age would recall, like he was really looked down upon because he wasn't like hitting home runs or whatever. He wasn't the greatest ball player. And to think of being the greatest basketball player to pivot to baseball and he was still better than like 99% of the world in baseball. And folks gave him hell for it. And it sort of disappointed me because that was quite a risk and what a thing to do in some ways. And to me, there's a lot of respect I have for him for doing that. Kind of would have been easy to avoid sort of public shaming or taking that risk. And in my opinion, there was no shame at all.
Yeah, that's a great example. What's something coming up that you're excited about in your business?
Boy, there's lots of things going on that's fun. I have one thing that I'm excited about, and I never really thought about it. And it's probably not the answer I should come with, but there's a book I have coming out next year, and it's a monograph. And I never really thought about it being something that is an interesting thing to do, but it's like having kind of your museum show in a way. And I feel honored to have the opportunity. So we're in the process of writing it and organizing it. And so that's really fun exercise because it helps me. It's like codifying all the thoughts I've had for 25 years and experiences and stories and everything that's happened. But I'm trying to write it from a lens of without like time, actually. It's not trying to be a rearview mirror. It's really meant to be how I understand design, how I understand the world of design, and hopefully as a kind of transfer of knowledge to younger designers. So for me, it's a really nice chance to share that experience.
Well, we'll have to look for that. And for folks that are listening, how do they learn more, follow you, get in touch, get on a waiting list for your book?
Oh, yeah, sure. I have my website is two websites. So betterlab.com and then my studio, which is toddbracher.com. And there is the latest information, ways to get in touch. And of course, anything related to the book will, of course, be there. Feel free to drop a note. And I'm always happy to chat with folks if folks feel free to reach out.
Anything that you would be excited to share on a podcast or talk about before we sign off?
Anything excited to share about a podcast? No, I think just to be able to have these types of conversations, it's not normal for me or most designers to have a conversation outside of the sort of design bubble. And I think it's really nice to have a kind of plain English chat around, you check your ego to have like a really nice normal conversation around how do folks see design. And I think that's really refreshing. So I appreciate the opportunity to have that.
Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you.
And thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for joining me on my journey through the realms of purpose-driven design. From designing a groundbreaking sustainable office chair to exploring how design intertwines with daily life, it's helpful to remember it's good business to align functional purpose with meaningful impact. You don't have to just design. You can innovate with purpose. I especially appreciated the reminder that design is often at its best when it's invisible. And I also really appreciated Todd's advice to take risks in pursuing your ideas. It's a good reminder for all of us. Next week, join me as I explore the early signs of burnout, some hidden causes, and offer some practical strategies to prevent and recover from it. Thank you for tuning in to Business as Unusual. Remember, in this ever-evolving world of modern business, it's not about fitting in. It's about standing out. See you next time. Stay curious, stay innovative, and always keep it unusual. I hope you enjoy the show. I love making it. If you did enjoy it, consider hopping over to the review portion of the platform you listen on and letting other people know about it. Or share the episode or the entire show with a friend or subscribe to the show. Definitely reach out, get on my newsletter, follow me on social media, and let me know what you like, what you don't like, and what you'd like to see in the future. Well, we love our guests. Appearance on the Business as Unusual podcast or any Bicurean consulting production is for information purposes only and is not to be considered an endorsement of their business practices, or character. Please properly vet anyone you find through this podcast and generally before you do any business with them. Thank you for listening.